the 4501 was a Southern engine originally, and it was sold to the Stearns Coal and Lumber Company. I don't know exactly when. This had to be in the early 60s, I would think. And then Paul Merriman, who was active in TVRM, bought it and brought it down to Chattanooga. And of course, it was in pretty bad shape. And they ran it once or twice, I understand, on short trips. And then when the steam program started in January of '68, Graham Claytor wanted that engine on the steam program, so we leased it from TVRM, and it became the main engine for a long time. But prior to that, we had 630 and 722 that Graham had swapped a couple of Alco rope switches to East Tennessee and Western North Carolina. But the trouble with that was that those engines were just 100-ton engines, 280s. They also had been Southern Railway engines to begin with. But they wouldn't carry the train that we wanted to run because we just were leaving people at the station. We just couldn't haul enough cars. So 4501 solved that problem for us for a while, and then finally the steam program grew in such popularity that even that engine wasn't large enough. And so we looked around for various other engines, and finally we went from one to the other. And some were good and some were not so good, but anyhow, we hauled many, many thousands of people. Well, 2839 was a Canadian Hudson, Royal Hudson they called it, and it had what was called an all-weather cab, which I didn't like too much because that was built for running in cold country, and I can understand that. But when we were running was down here in our part of the world, we didn't need an enclosed cab, and that made it hotter in there, you know. But it was a good engine. It was the only one I could outrun the rail fans with on the highway, and that's the one I had to use in the coal miner's daughter because the 4501 had broken down. And I ran all night long to get to what they called Butcher Hollow, which was actually Pardee, Virginia, you know, but the movies, half the things you see, most of the things you see on the movies are not for real anyhow, you know. But 2839 was a good, fast locomotive. It ran well and it ran fast. And I remember the rod brasses just wore out when I was in Lexington, Kentucky. And so I had a diesel there signed for whatever we needed it for. So I spotted the rods and took them off and put them on a truck and sent them to Birmingham. It had new bushings put in and sent back, and we put them back on and ran the trip Saturday and Sunday. And there was all kind of things. We performed miracles a whole lot of times. When I look back on it now, I don't know. Of course, I couldn't do it now at my age, but it was, we did it to keep the trains running, and we mostly did keep them running. My 611 was Norfolk and Western, what they call J-class engine. And in my opinion, it was the most perfectly balanced steam engine I've ever been on. It was roller bearing, you know, from all over. And you could run 100 miles an hour and didn't throw you out of the seat box. And it was just a good modern engine. Of course, it was built later on. It had the advantage of having all the new things that was coming out on steam. And I think that if the diesel hadn't showed up in a couple of years, we would have had some super steam locomotives that weren't too expensive to operate because they were working on that. But the 611 was a real good engine. It was a pleasure to run it. And Bob Claytor was proud of his 611, and I don't blame him. He had something to be proud of. The 765 was the last engine that we leased, and the reason for leasing it was we had the 2716, which we had got them from Kentucky Railway Museum and spent a lot of money on it, rebuilt. But it developed trouble in the throat sheet, which I was afraid was dangerous. So we had to stop running it. And we were just halfway through with our trips that summer. And it so happened that the 765 that these fellows had rebuilt, they were running it a little bit and seemed to be doing real well. And they were through running just about the time that I lost the 2716. So Viceline and I went up and negotiated with them and brought it home. And we finished up on that. And that was the last engine that I was running. When I took it back home, I climbed down and retired. That was it. Yeah, we kept growing. Our trains kept getting longer and longer, and you appreciated an engine that would handle it and keep up a schedule. And those engines did just that. And before we got those things, we used to have to double head with the 100-ton engines, and that's worked you to death. I tell you, trying to maintain 2 engines on the road. That's we had to water them. We had to let anybody else do their work. When we got to the end of the trip, then we had to water them, sand them, clean them, inspect them, put coal on, make any repairs that was necessary in order to start the trip the next morning. And there was many times that we didn't get to bed till way after midnight, but I never quit the day until my engine was ready to go the next morning. That was just my practice. Graham's idea was to introduce the generation at that time to the generation in our early time as to what went on in the country with the railroads. And he did. I was promoted from a roundhouse foreman to master mechanic steam for the system in 1968, the first week in 1968. And I had an office in Atlanta on Spring Street for a while, but these 2 little engines had been brought to Birmingham and put in an abandoned diesel shop in Norris Yard. And so it was too inconvenient to be trying to go back and forth so much. So I moved my office to Birmingham, and that was where the rest of the program took place. Now, running steam engines in the days of the diesel was not the easiest thing I ever tried to do. There were a lot of things against you. In the first place, there wasn't any parts. Anything that was available was something that you found that had been stored away somewhere, or somebody had and was left over, and we got a hold of it. Other things, we had to make patterns and go to the foundry. And then not only that, but there was no shops along the line of road. Whatever you had to have in the way of supplies and parts, you had to kind of figure ahead of time and take them with you, pile them up on top of the tender. Rod brasses, for example, and things like that. And then, of course, there was everybody on the Southern in officialdom was not in favor of the steam engine. Some of them actually were afraid of steam engines. It never crossed their mind that these things ran and supported the country for over 100 years. And they built our country, as a matter of fact. But they never thought about that. They just kind of got in their way of running freight trains and diesels, But we survived, and we carried. It was a good program. It was known overseas. I've got many letters from people from overseas all over the world that had come to our country and had ridden on our steam trains and thought it was great. And then when I went to South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand, I met people that I had ridden on my train. I didn't know it at the time, but they had been with us. And so they invited me up to run their engines, which I did. And so all in all, it was a good program. Of course, the railroad, the new administration decided to do away with it, and that was their decision. I had retired by that time, but I worked like a few months making 47 years on the railroad, and I was 67 years old when I retired. So, and the steam program required you working night and day. There was 2 particular times we had problems, and Paul Brock, one of my regular firemen, and I worked 40.5 hours without stopping, and just grabbing a bite to eat without sleeping. You know. And but we got the trains over the road, and that was the whole idea, keep them rolling. So it was a grueling job at some times. It was very hard, and everything didn't work just like it should. But eventually we got better and better at it, and people began to accept it. Although some never did on the railroad, but they had to put up with us anyhow. You know, and it wasn't. We didn't break down a whole lot. We had to be towed in a time or two. But then I can remember 2 times when diesels broke down, and I towed them in with the steam engine. So it was a 2-way street, more or less. This was a program that introduced the then and present generation as to what we did back right before the war, and prior to that, and on back into the early years of steam program. And it was historical. We actually made history, I think, because it was just a sort of a worldwide thing before it was over with. And some other railroads decided to do the same thing. You know, they got out 1 or 2 steam engines still running today. The 84, 44, and 1522 is still running today. So I don't know why actually the railroad decided to give it up, but the present administration just decided, I suppose, that it wasn't profitable or something. So they just decided to end it.